Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I see people are still coming online, so I'm going to give them a minute, but I am going to start in with just a couple quick announcements and reminders. Again, hello, my name is Jenn Fagan-Fry. I am the NOAA Institutional Repository Manager. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for our latest installment in our Publishing NOAA series. Today we are going to talk about tech memos and starting NOAA series. So just a couple quick housekeeping things. I am going to be running the webinar today. However, I do have our outreach librarian, Katie Rowley. She is also on the line. She will be manning the chat and the question panel. So as we go, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into preferably the question panel, because then it will record them so we can make sure we can answer everyone's questions. At the end of the webinar, we will be, I have left enough time so we can discuss if there's questions or anything that anyone would like to discuss. This session is being recorded, so we will put it up on the library's YouTube channel as we always do. And with that, I am going to dive in. So Katie, if you can just confirm really quickly that everyone can see my screen.
Yes, everyone can see your screen.
Great, thank you very much. So again, today we are going to talk about starting tech memos or any sort of NOAA publication series. So first and foremost, NOAA has over 6,500 researchers and scientists, and that doesn't include our grantees at cooperative institutes and the science centers and anybody else that we grant money out to. And each year, all of those scientists and researchers produce nearly 2,500 publications that generally fall into one of two categories, and that's what I have listed here. These are peer-reviewed journal articles, which I think we're all pretty familiar with what those are, or gray literature. And when we talk about gray literature, most often what we're referring to is what we call, and what you're used to hearing me refer to as, NOAA publications. And that's what we're going to kind of focus on today. So I have here a loose definition of what gray literature is. It's called the Prague definition. I have a citation here if you're interested, but it's sort of one of the more agreed upon definitions of what gray literature is. And essentially, I'm not going to read this verbatim, but essentially what it is gray literature is any sort of publication that is produced on all levels, so any level of government, or it could be within an academic institution or a business and industry, the private sector. And usually these are sort of considered a kind of like open access, right? So anyone can really access a NOAA tech memo or a NOAA technical report, or even our reports to Congress. They are accessible to anybody, that's sort of in direct contrast to like a peer-reviewed journal publication. So what I want to do is spend a chunk of time sort of define like how we define a NOAA publication. And the main place we go to when we're talking about NOAA publications and how to define those is NOAA Administrative Order 201-32G. I've linked it here, and Katie has a link that she can provide to you guys in the chat as well. I reference this frequently, so I'm sure if you've been to any of my webinars, I talk about 201-32G a lot. But essentially what it does is it defines all types of publications that NOAA produces, specifically scientific and technical publications. And you can see on here that 201-32G defines these publications as they are produced throughout NOAA or for NOAA by professionals engaged in scientific, technical, engineering, and economic research, services, and operations. And they are generally and primarily scoped towards technical audiences and special user groups. That's just primarily, that's sort of a generalization. Within 201-32G, it covers both physical and digital formats. So we're not just focusing on, paper copies or digital copies. It covers both. In addition, it also discusses briefly, albeit, but still there, discusses a lot of the processes related to these publications. So like technical editing, editorial processing, copy editing. It defines those within 201-32G. It also talks briefly about how to distribute these publications. So the forms that are required for printing. It talks about the depository library requirements, which we'll go over each of these a little more in depth. But this is sort of the scope of what NAO 201-32G covers. So what I'd like to do now is within that NAO, it defines specifically the scientific and technical media categories into into 8 categories. And I kind of want to go through each of them individually. We're going to focus on probably 2 or 3 of them very heavily. The other ones not so much, but they are covered within this NAO. So the first 2 would be contributions to non-NOAA media. So any NOAA authored or sponsored, so we're talking about our NOAA authored and NOAA funded articles published in non-NOAA media, which those are going to be journal articles. So the society journal articles, proceedings of workshops or conferences, meetings, your AGU conference proceedings, whatever the things of that nature. Monographs, if you publish a chapter in a book. Those sorts of publications are what are considered non-NOAA media. And then we also have NOAA scientific journals. So these are high quality, editorial controlled, and we're going to come back to that term, editorial controlled, which essentially means like a formal peer-reviewed sort of publication, major periodical for publication of results of original scientific research and technical investigations. So 2 examples I have here are like the Fishery Bulletin and Marine Fisheries Reviews. Those fall under this category of NOAA publication. So then we have what's considered NOAA formal series or formal publications. And this is where we're going to get back to that editorial controlled publications. So these include the journals of, So the formal series within NOAA are listed per NAO 201-32G, the NOAA Professional Papers Series, which I've included that definition of here. And I've highlighted a few sections, as you can see in red, that we use when we're trying to help folks define their publication series. NOAA Professional Papers, which is a NOAA-wide series, is defined as high quality, editorial controlled major series for the formal publication of scientific or technical treatises that are long, detailed, high quality papers. So that sort of sounds similar to those formal publications, the NOAA the NOAA scientific journals, but it's a little bit different. So they still have that same high quality level, but generally these publications are going to be too lengthy. They're just going to be real long. Most publications in a journal or even in those NOAA specific journals are, no more than a couple tens of pages, right? We're talking 20, 30 pages or so. A lot of these we're referring to are going to be much bigger and include lots of material like charts, tables, other sort of special features. A lot of the existing NOAA professional papers are hundreds of pages long. I mean, obviously that's too long for a scientific journal. So that is where they fall. The other formal series is the NOAA Atlases series. So these have the same editorial control as those professional papers, but they're separated due to the formatting and printing needs of atlases. So again, we do have a number of those atlases, and they are a NOAA-wide series that can be broken down into line offices. So In addition to those two formal series, there's also other miscellaneous formal publications. And I will say it's a little scarce in the NAO when they define these, but essentially they're formal publications other than those listed above. I know that leaves a lot to be desired in terms of a definition, but that's sort of where the NAO leaves it in terms of formal publications. So the next set of items that we're going to talk about, and these are what we're going to spend a bulk of our time discussing, are NOAA informal series. So there's two NOAA-wide authorized series types. There's NOAA Tech Reports and NOAA Technical Memorandum. I think we're all relatively familiar with these, but just in case, and again, much like with the formal series, I sort of highlighted some of the key characteristics that set apart these types of publications. So you'll see that the technical reports can be issued in sub-series required to meet the needs of each line office. So the intent is to use these series to publish scientific and technical papers not suitable for non-NOAA media, or so not suitable for journal articles or those scientific journals that NOAA puts out, or those formal series that we just talked about, the professional papers and the atlases. So a lot of the reason for that would be because of their length. They have giant data sets attached or included in them, something like that. Then there's the Tech Memo series, which I think we're all pretty familiar with, but the Tech Memo series, again, is a sub-series that all line offices can utilize. And these publications are not suitable for those same other options, the formal series, journal articles, that sort of stuff. However, the key point when it comes to tech memos is the need for relatively fast publication, the limited audience for the paper's information, or similar reasons. So tech memos are intended to sort of provide an avenue for speedier publication as opposed to the formal series or specifically non-NOAA media or journal publishing. So it goes on in the NAO to say that reports of preliminary, partial, or negative results, interim reports, and reports for limited distribution are examples of these types of, is an example of a NOAA technical memorandum. So the next two types of publications we're going to talk about are NOAA technical translations and NOAA contract and grant reports. So technical translations include serials or miscellaneous publications that contain translation information about planned translation or the translated tables of contents of foreign scientific or technical literature of interest to NOAA. So these are not things that we see super often. They do not come through the library very frequently. I do think these are a little bit of a relic of the past. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on technical translations. We don't see them come through. If you have questions about those, let us know and we can talk to you a little bit more in depth about them. Same thing with contract and grant reports. So these are going to be technical reports, but they are things that were sponsored by NOAA, things that we have contracted out to either large companies like most recently and infamously the MITRE report, or through a grant. A group of researchers did a report for NOAA and we're reporting back on those results, and we funded and sponsored that. So that's what those are. I mean, that one seems pretty straightforward. Oh, I think we missed one. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back. Sorry, technical service publications. I'm sorry, I skipped a slide there. So technical service publications, again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these, but they are things that that we do see and that do come through the report, through the IR. So technical service publications include serials and miscellaneous printed materials, generated through technical programs, services, and operations. Again, this is something that can span any of the line offices, so it would be a sub-series within each line office. And I've listed here a handful of examples that are provided within the NAO. So technical training papers, planning reports, information serials and series, technical news media, other miscellaneous sort of technical publications, things like that. So, and we went over those. So now let's get into it. Now that we sort of have defined what those publications are and we know where to find those definitions and that terminology, how do we go about establishing a series? What is the process? There isn't really a structured or formal guidance for establishing these series, but there is sort of a basic general framework and guideline and set of best practices to follow. And I have it sort of broken down really generally here, and we're going to sort of look at each step individually. So first, we're going to look at the nature of the series, determining the series category, naming and numbering conventions, approvals that are required, and then finally, we're going to talk about distribution. So first and foremost, if you think you need to start a series, we're going to have to determine the nature of that series. So really, what you're going to be looking at is first and foremost, editorial processing for the document, right? So the scientific editing or the level of review for that document, what sort of technical editing and the technical editing that goes into that, right? The arrangement, the logical arrangement, the arguments, determining what the appropriate audience is. I mean, is this meant for the general public? Is it meant for a more specialized subset of researchers? Who is the target audience? What is the scope of this document? How copy editing, who's going to do that? Sort of those steps, right? Formatting, the 508 requirements, all of that. You have to sort of get the very basics down. And I will say, as we look at nature of the series, the next step, which is determining the series category, these two things go hand in hand. And while they're separate sort of steps, they're both intertwined, and you can sort of see this, right? So the things to consider when we're determining the series category, and mind you, I mean those categories we just discussed, that were defined and laid out in NAO 201-32G, is sort of that level of editorial control and review. Is this a formal publication? Is this a more informal publication? This is where that audience piece comes in. Is it internal? Is it limited? Is this really technical? Is this something that's appropriate for the general public? Is this something that the general public cannot see? All of these things have to sort of be determined. The content, the actual content within the document, is it an atlas? Are these findings? Is this a preliminary report? Is it a final report? How long is it? Is it 10 pages and it's pretty formal? I don't know, maybe it should be a journal article as opposed to a tech memo. Is it, 300 pages and it's mostly tables? Maybe that would be more of an instance to utilize a professional paper or possibly a tech report, depending on the level of review. And the time frame, you have to really, and I think this is really key when you're determining what category to place your publication under. How quickly do you want or need that information to be available? If it needs to be a quick turnaround, that's when you're going to look more at those informal series. If there's some time and you want to have that added level of review, maybe then you should opt for the formal or possibly the non-NOAA media. So once you sort of have the basics down, right, those are the big hard questions essentially to come up with and to determine when you're going through and deciding A, where to publish, and B, if you need to establish a new series. If you have decided that this does need to be a new series publication within the line office, whether you've decided it's a tech report or a tech memo or a data report series or a technical information series, something like that. Once you have made that determination, then you come to naming and numbering conventions. So this is where we within the library would sort of recommend when you're doing your naming and numbering conventions, this is where you're going to finalize all of those formatting steps, right? Like how your template's created. I put in here, remember your 508 elements and set those up in your template, and the library can help you with that. But don't forget that aspect of establishing series, creating your templates. And then you can determine your series statement. So this name will be carried throughout all of the series publications. It'll be on each and every one. But you also need to determine sort of your numbering schema. So I put here a couple examples, and every office and every lab sort of has their own way and preferred way, and that's fine. You just need to make sure that you make that determination in the beginning and that it's carried throughout the entire series. There's nothing more frustrating than having to change series numbering or update series numbering or even a series name midway through the process. It happens, and we can help you with that process if need be, but to think critically about it ahead of time and have that established and firm when you first start up the series is going to serve you better long term. And then next is the approvals. So since the NAO sort of provides the authority to establish a series at the line office level, there isn't really any sort of NOAA level agency-wide entity or anything that you have to approve anything through. However, it doesn't mean that me within the library could just go ahead and be like, you know what, we're going to start a library tech memo series. I should probably run that through A, my boss, the library director, and B, we do recommend going through the line office and minimum lab leadership just to be briefed so that you can make sure everything is okay and formalized, especially because you need to determine what approvals are required for those publications. So if you are one of the offices or labs that is using RPTS, how will that be tracked within RPTS? Who do those approvals have to go to? What are the IQA requirements for that particular publication, depending on what the content of your document is? So these are things you have to consider in terms of approvals. And then finally, once you have all of that and your publication is sort of complete, you need to think about distribution and access. So, and I broke this down into two sections, physical publications and digital publications. I did this, I sort of battled with whether I should discuss this because most things that we create now really don't wind up in a physical publication anymore. That being said, I still think it's important that we know that there are rules for these physical publications. So when you have a physical version of your publication, according to the NAO, it is supposed to pass through the Logistics Management Division, and then they will pass that on to the FDLP, which is the Federal Depository Library Program. And I have a note here, that is different than the library, and that is different than the repository. We in the library, the NOAA Central Library, do not have anything to do with FDLP per se. So that's a different sort of program. However, in addition to sending things through logistics management, you'll see you do have to send a copy to us in the library. And that is per NOAA Administrative Order 205-17A. And we'll talk about that a little more depth in just one second. And then there's also NARA requirements for physical publications. So per our record schedule, most of these series publications actually fall under, I believe it's chapter 100-01, I believe, where at least tech memos and tech reports fall under that. Those items do have to go to NARA. So arrangements need to be made to send those to NARA at the proper time. Again, if my memory serves correctly, I believe it's a 20-year sort of retention schedule, and then it's shipped to NARA. So anything that was published, any tech memo or tech report that was published in 2000 can be shipped to NARA now. And then digital publications, and this is where I'd really like to focus. So when it comes to those digital publications, which that's primarily what we are putting out now, right? The NOAA Administrative Order 205-17A is the library is responsible for that NAO. That is what we call, our library administrative order, because it deals with our processes and information dissemination, and that's where we come in. I will say, if you look at that one now, it is under review. We have rewritten that. We have revised it heavily, and it is currently going through approvals so that we will have a newer version up there. That being said, you can still see it still follows a similar structure, but there are a few changes, and I'm going to go over those because the library is actually taking on a little bit more for you. So per NAO 205-17A, it says you have to send things to the NOAA Central Library, which is true because the NOAA Institutional Repository is housed in the NOAA Central Library. So you are sending those publications per the NOAA PAR plan to the NOAA Institutional Repository, which fulfills your requirements in 205-17A. So on top of that, normally, so you're essentially fulfilling number 2 under the physical publications, right? Since you are doing that and sending it to us, we in the library and the IR team are working with NARA. We will handle your NARA transfers and requirements for you. So any publication that's submitted to the repository, we take on your records management for it. So any of your tech memos, your tech reports, your professional papers, your reports to Congress, those things that are accepted into the repository, we now do your NARA requirements. So that takes one thing off of your plate. In addition, before I had mentioned FDLP, that Federal Depository Library Program, that is a division of GPO, which is the Government Publishing Office. We are currently working with GPO to have them harvest the repository directly so that we don't have to send anything to them for FDLP. They can harvest it on their own. So that would also take that off of your plates as well. So essentially, in submitting things to the repository, we're sort of taking care of all those distribution and access avenues. We're going to take care of all those for you. So it's sort of like a one-stop shop, right? You send it to me and you're good to go. You're done. Pretty hands-off. So that sort of leads into what is the library's role in all of this, and how can we help you? And throughout the process of trying to establish a new NOAA Publications series, or if you'd like to restart a series or sort of revise or revamp a series that's already existing. I will start out by saying library approval is not required. You don't have to okay anything with us. It is not required. That being said, we are here to help you and to assist you throughout that process. We appreciate when people tell us that they are starting these new series, because we can help coordinate some aspects that I'll go over in just a second here. So first and foremost, we are happy to assist you with determining and establishing your series naming conventions. What we can do is pull lists of what already exists for your office or your line office or within NOAA as a whole. We can provide you with examples of what current numbering schemas are available and help you determine what's going to best serve your publication and that series of documents. We can provide you with consultations on formatting and editing. So I mentioned this briefly earlier when you're working on a template and creating sort of how your series are going to look. We can help you with that, specifically with Section 508 compliance. We can offer some guidance, assistance. I am always happy to take a look at a template and tell you what needs to be fixed in terms of 508 compliance. And then finally, our biggest role is in terms of access and dissemination services. So obviously posting it in the repository, but also DOI assignments. So not all NOAA publications get DOIs. However, a large majority of NOAA publications are eligible for DOIs. The only series currently that we automatically assign DOIs to are Technical Memorandum. If you submit a tech memo to us, we will automatically assign a DOI to it. So you do not have to necessarily request a DOI ahead of time for your tech memo. If a tech memo comes to us without a DOI on it, we're going to assign a DOI to it. All tech memos get DOIs. Any other series or NOAA publication is eligible. We just need to know that you would like a DOI for that. And when you submit to the repository, there is an option on the submission form to say, yes, please assign a DOI. Or if you would like to embed your DOI in your document, so like post it right on that title page or within your citation, recommended citation, you can request that DOI ahead of time. In terms of establishing a new series, if you would like everything in that series to have a DOI, talk to us ahead of time and we can set up something much like we do with tech memos where we just know when we see that series, we're going to slap a DOI on it every time. So now that we sort of talked about what NOAA pubs are, sort of the general guidelines and framework for establishing a series and how we within the library can help you, I think it's important for everyone to know where you can actually access all of these NOAA publications. The series I have series publications here, but I mean NOAA publications as a whole. And there's sort of three main places that we house all of these. There's the institutional repository. We also have older NOAA publications and series documents in the NOAA library catalog. A lot of these older materials we are currently trying to digitize and move to the repository. So if it's not in the repository, you can always check the library catalog or check with us to see if we have a digital version that just hasn't made it into the repository yet. But a lot of the items that are in the catalog are things that we do not have a digital copy for. And then we have also created a NOAA Publications Guide. And I think if Katie, you can put the link in the chat for everyone for that. It's a really wonderful resource where we have broken down, it's a listing of all current and historical NOAA series publications. We have it broken down by line office. In addition to these NOAA publications, so your tech memo and tech report series, we've also included links to journal articles by line office and lab as well. We do also, we are working and adding in cooperative institute publications as well. So that is still in progress, but that you'll start to see those being populated. So I want to bring that to everyone's attention because oftentimes when someone asks us to help them with series numbering or to help them with a series naming convention, we sort of start with that publications guide to see what the office has historically done. It's just a good way to sort of see where everything was and where it needs to go and where we'd like to stay, just for consistency's sake. And I will say, via any of these options, if for whatever reason you would like us to provide you with a list of, say your office would like to see all of the reports that we have, like all the tech memo reports that we have for your particular office, we can pull a report for you on that. We just need you to ask. Essentially, all you have to do is ask. If you want to see just a particular series, we can pull that report for you. Just let us know. So with that, and before we get to questions, I am going to do my shameless plug for our next installment in the series. Next month on September 10th, we are going to be talking about the repository specifically, but we're going to look at it as a research tool and how you can use it to locate resources and things of that nature, and how to actually search within the repository. We'll talk about basic searching, advanced search options. We do have a handful of new features that we'd like to highlight for you, things that should hopefully make your experience in searching and looking through the repository a little bit easier. And our head of public services, Trevor Riley, will be doing that one. So you will get a month off from having to hear my voice. So we're looking forward to that one. So please tune in. And with that, and I think we have like 20, 25 minutes or so. I'm going to open it up for questions and or comments, however you want to do that.
Awesome. Okay, everyone, this is Katie, and I will be reading off your questions. The first question we have is from Cheryl. For the technical or training media, where do training videos sit?
Wow, that's a really great question. I don't have a great answer for that right off the top of my head. I would have to go back to the NAO and take a quick look at it. I do believe there is a section about I think it's called like non-standard media, and by standard media, I think they're referring to like publications. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm going to have to get back to you on that one, Cheryl. I'll have to look it up for you.
Okay. Next question's from Christy. What are the time frames for the various series? What is a quick turnaround?
So that's a great question. And unfortunately, I don't have a firm answer for that. The NAO doesn't provide any guidance. And I think in terms of quick turnaround, that's really going to be decided within the office. I think a quick turnaround for OAR may be very different than what a quick turnaround for fisheries would be. That being said, I know, I mean, you know, when you're looking at a traditional publishing avenue, right, going through a publisher and submitting a journal article, that process can take anywhere from 4 or 5 months up to a year and a half to 2 years. So I would say anything, a quick turnaround to me would be anything less than that, which again is a huge range. But quick turnaround, I think, is intended to refer to, you know, is intended, quick turnaround is really referring to in comparison to a more formalized publication method, whether it's, you know, something, those publications that require that full level of peer review, which can be quite lengthy. So I think you have to sort of take into account timeframes in terms of the level of peer review and how much time is going to be spent on that peer review. I'm sorry, I don't have a more like it's 3 weeks or whatever. I unfortunately I don't have that. I think it really depends on the document and what the office is hoping to do.
Okay. And you may have covered this one, Jen, but I'm going to have you kind of go over it again. From Jan, how do you find out the number in these series or in a series?
So if you're, just to clarify, if you're looking, say you know there's an existing series and you're like, I don't know what number we're on. Let's just say the library has a tech memo series, which we don't, but the library has a tech memo series, and Katie, you and I are going to publish a tech memo, but we're like, gosh, I don't know what number we're on. Are we on number 4 or are we on number 850? What we in the library can help you do that. Or you can look in the repository, and if you when you search in the repository, you can search by a series name, a series title, and when you put that in there, you can sort by date. I would generally recommend sorting by date, looking for the most recent publication, and then checking that series number there. If that was what Jan was asking.
Okay.
If not, let me know and we can revisit that again. Again, you could also always just contact the library. We're happy to pull a report and we can sort of dig around and find that information for you. I do it all the time for folks. I'm happy to look that up. That being said, all we can tell you is the last publication that we received within the library, but at this point, most offices are sending us pretty much every publication. So in terms of these NOAA publications, so generally we have the most current version.
Great. Okay. Jen responded that who should they contact for this? What email should they be contacting?
Oh, great, great question. So, gosh, that's a really good question. You know, I'm going to say, why don't you go ahead and contact the repository account, noaa.repository@noaa.gov. Generally, that'll come to myself or someone who can handle that request pretty quickly for you.
Awesome. Okay, moving on to the next question. Formal versus informal reports is still unclear. Shannon is saying that they're writing a 200+ page status report for a program, and they're looking for guidance.
Sure. So I can only sort of interpret what is available here. I think in terms of formal and informal, what you're going to look at, and from my understanding of the NAO and how I would approach this, is look more at the level of review that the document's going to go through. Are you going to send it through a bunch of reviewers? And that includes internal reviewers. How editorially controlled, we're going to say, because that's the language used in the NAO, is this document. Now, all documents that we put out, obviously we have people take a look at them and check them for typos and you know, catch all of those mistakes that we made. I think in terms of this, we're talking about like a more structured sort of peer review type review is what we're referring to here when it comes to formal series. And in terms of length, any of those NOAA series can accept anything that's super big and long. So length doesn't necessarily matter. And when it comes to other extra content, right? Like if it has lots of tables or it has lots of charts, or images, right? Like there's fisheries has a lot of things that have image catalogs, right? And those are frequently put together as tech memos, and that's okay. Those things can sort of be used in any of those series, right? It could be used in a tech report. You can have lots of charts and tables in a tech memo. You can even do it in a professional paper. I think the one of these series, the NOAA Atlas, is the only one that really has some constraints in terms of that extra sort of material and the formatting needs when it comes to atlases. So I think in terms of that, it doesn't necessarily matter if it's the formal or informal when we're talking about length or the content within them. I think it's more about what sort of editorial control or level of editorial control are we talking about?
Okay. And our next question from Amanda kind of follows up on this.
Mm-hmm.
For NOAA Tech memos and reports, is there a specific requirement for the editorial process? She's specifically interested in whether an external review or more than one is required.
So that is also a great question. And unfortunately, I don't have an answer for that. I don't know. The guidance is very vague in regards to that. I would say if you're seeking an external review, that would be slightly more formalized, in my opinion. Again, that's my opinion. The NAO itself does not necessarily lay it out in black and white exactly what it means by that editorial control level of review. I do recommend folks take a look at that section and see if maybe they can infer something from it. But I'm happy, and I continue to do this always, look around for other resources that give us a little more information in terms of, you know, some of these details that are a little vague in this particular NAO That being said, I will also mention that I know that this NAO is currently under review and being revised, 201-32G, where it defines these things. That is not under the purview of the library, so we actually are not responsible for that. NAO, the Logistics Management branch is, yes, I believe it's the Logistics Management Division, is responsible for that particular NAO. I do not know where it is in the process. I don't know more than just it is currently under review. So as we get word that something has changed or been clarified, I will be the first to bring it to all of you. But to answer your question, it is not explicitly laid out. So I don't have a firm answer for that, unfortunately.
Okay, thanks for that. We do have Jim Lee, who is commenting that external peer review would be for a formal paper, while there still may be high level of technical review, and that the informal can be highly reviewed technically, but it does not have external peer review. So.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, that's sort of how I have interpreted it. I mean, that's how I would interpret that. You know, if you're going with any sort of external review, that's going to be a real formal type review. And I think that moves you into that formal series range where you're talking about NOAA professional papers or atlases, or possibly you need to go to a non-NOAA media source as well. So I think that that's a decent line, I think, or a reasonable, we'll say reasonable line to sort of draw between the two. Thank you, Jim.
So our next question is from Alan, that their lab has a NOAA Tech Memo series, but from what he can see, it hasn't been used since 2002. Would it be easier to start a new series or to continue the established one?
I will always recommend this. And again, this is just my recommendation as a librarian, as the repository manager. I would recommend just continuing the series. That being said, if the scope of the series you feel is sort of shifted, then it may be best to start a new series. But if the scope is still relatively the same, and you're happy with the naming of the Tech Memo series, then I'd say go ahead and continue it. We're happy to help you work through that as well in terms of continuation. If you do want to establish a new one, that's also fine. I think that if you have an existing series, but you're looking at a new set of documents, I would look at scope and see how they compare. And then maybe if the scope is slightly different or shifted, maybe it would be best to start a new series.
Great. Okay. We also have a question from Christy. Can you provide any information on influential scientific information and highly influential scientific assessment peer review requirements?
Short answer, no. Long answer, let me get back to you on that one. Off the top of my head, I cannot, but I can get some information together for you regarding those things. Yes, I will have to sort of contact you offline and provide that info, because I do have to dig around for some things. But I can do that and respond back to you.
Great. I have a question from Ron. Does your team provide guidance and or recommendations for adhering to proper copyright rules?
So copyright can get real tricky. We have some information on copyright. When it comes to copyright, it gets real tricky because we are government employees, or we've received government funding, and where do those sorts of lines lie? I do have some information about copyright. I don't want to say yes or no. We'll provide you with guidance on it. We can take a look at things and try to point you in the proper direction. None of us are legal counsel. If you want a firm or hard yes or no, we generally refer people to general counsel for that. But that being said, we do have some FAQs and some literature that can help people sort of determine what they can and cannot do, if that makes sense. But again, like we're not legal counsel, so we don't necessarily provide recommendations or anything like that. But we can provide you with some information and things of that nature.
Great. Okay, we have a.
You know what? Before you move on, Katie, I will say an easy primer on copyright, especially related to publishing and publications, specifically journal publications or anything with a publisher. So even if we're talking about book chapters or things like that, I have set up and created NOAA Scholarly Communications and Publishing Subject Guide. It's available through the NOAA Central Library website under our subject guides, and you'll find it. It says Scholarly Communication and Publishing, I believe is what it's called. There is a tab on there all about copyright, and it has a couple shortened FAQs and a few links for you that we've pulled together for folks. So we always recommend people start there, and then we can help you find some more detailed resources from that point as well.
That was the last link I have put on the chat for everyone. If you wanted to check out the chat, that publishing resource guide is what Jen was just talking about. It's linked there.
Thank you, Katie.
Okay, we do have a couple questions from Shannon. To follow up, NOAA professional papers go through the line office or regional office?
That is an excellent question. From my understanding, they are through the line office level. However, I believe there may be one or two that are through a more regional or division level office. But from my understanding, professional papers are through a line office level. And I think that's part of it. Could be, don't hold me to this, but it could be, and this is sort of my understanding, another reason why they define those as formal versus the tech memos and tech reports that are more informal, because those tech memos and tech reports can be a sub-series, which means those can go through the division offices and the labs. They don't necessarily all go through the line office, if that makes sense. That's a great question. That's a great question. I wish I could say that's definitively it. However, that is my understanding, and that appears historically to have been the structure of those publications. Yes.
Great. Okay, and Shannon asked, can you use a previously published figure in a tech memo if you properly cite it? And I think this links to copyright. And Jen, I'm just going to say yes, because if it was published by NOAA, it's not under any copyright. So you should be free to use something in a previously published tech memo.
Yes, and even, I mean, just in general, as long as you provide attribution, you should be good.
Awesome. Okay, we've got a question here from Shirley. Maybe you covered this and I may have missed it. Is there a fee for publishing NOAA tech memos or NOAA professional papers like commercial publications have?
No. Nope. Let me rein that back for a hot second. In terms of digitally publishing them, no, because they're digital and we're just putting those up on the website and we're handling them through the library. However, there may be fees associated if you choose to have those formally printed and published through the logistics management division. So if you choose to have your publication, printed, then there may be fees associated with that. I do not, I don't know what those are. You'd have to check with the logistics management division, but that would be the only fee that I would be aware of that would be associated with it. That's a great question.
Awesome. And then we have Jim has said again, can you mention that submitting to the NOAA IR will satisfy past requirements to submit to NTIS?
Oh, yes. Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Jim. So yes, in the current iteration of NAO 205-17A, it discusses NTIS, which is the National Technical Information Service, I believe is what that stands for. NTIS does still exist as an entity. However, it does not function the same as it used to. So how it is described in that NAO, it does not apply anymore. And in the revised version, you'll see that NTIS does not make an appearance at all in it in the new iteration of that NAO. Because as Jim stated in his sort of question or reminder to me, in providing the repository with that copy, you are fulfilling essentially those same requirements. It's a matter of dissemination and the fact that we are making our government information freely and openly accessible to the public. So yes, thank you, Jim. Again, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, and then Jim also put something a little bit earlier too that for everyone's information, under informal reports and under tech memos, there are also process reports and administrative reports or center reference documents to consider.
Yes. Yes. And, you know, there's enough flexibility in these definitions, especially within those informal series definitions where there is some wiggle room. There are other types of reports that may be able to be filed under there. So absolutely, yes. Fisheries has a lot of those types of reports, the process reports and administrative reports, things like that. And those are all classified as informal series.
Okay, we have one last question I think we can squeeze in. Are authors responsible for 508ing their tech memos?
So this is a tricky question. I will say the library does not provide Section 508 remediation services for NOAA publications, whether it's a tech memo, tech report, any of that. I know some offices have the authors do that work. Some offices have technical editors and reviewers who do that work. Some offices have administrative staff who do that work. Some have interns do that work. It is sort of on an office level. I personally do not care who does the work. It is not, we within the IR and the library in general, we don't want to dictate that. We understand that resources are scarce. We understand everyone has a lot of work, and we all have limited staff. We all share that unfortunate reality that there is too much and not enough people or resources. So we are here to help in any way that we can, but really it is up to the office who they make do that. I hate to say that, but who they sort of force into doing those requirements. I will say just another shameless plug, because you know how I love these. If you have questions or difficulties or need someone to talk to, or you don't understand the requirements, every Tuesday from 2 p.m. Eastern until 3:30 p.m. Eastern, you can contact us for our Section 508 and NOAA IR office hours. You will run into myself, Jan Thomas, Jamie Roberts, or Sarah Davis, and one of the four of us, all four of us work on the IR and know Section 508 compliance pretty much inside and out. We can assist you with any of that. So unfortunately, I can't tell you, yes, you're required to. However, I just know that as you submit a document to me, it must be 508 compliant. I don't care who does the work though.
Good to know. Okay, that is the end of our questions, and that is the end of the hour.
Okay, I will say if you have more questions, guys, please feel free to email me directly, or you can email the IR account or library.reference@noaa.gov, and we can help you. Just remember, we are here to help you throughout all of this.
Thank you, everyone. This was recorded and it will be placed on the library's YouTube channel in the next 24 hours. Thanks.
Thank you.